Hello, everybody. It's interesting how situations like this make you feel like you should have all the answers, no? Because there's a bunch of people sitting in front of you, looking at you. They've probably paid money to hear you speak. Well, I'm going to tell you I'm not here to give you any answers. I'm mostly here to pose questions. My name is Delany Boutkan. Well, in jargon, you would call me a curator. I would like to focus on the fact that I write and that I usually produce public programs and other public formats on the relation or kind of my fascination with the economic systems in which design is being produced, mostly in relation to popular media. In simple words, it means that I'm mostly fascinated by where the money comes from in the design industry. And social media and advertising are helpful tools to understand where and how money is being made. Well, to put the pressure up a little bit more, also these talks are being filmed. And by us being here as speakers, we're giving the organization consent to put the material up on social media, which is great because I can cut out all the smart stuff that I'm saying and put them on my social media. But what is also interesting is that in a way it turns us into products of media and what we're saying into products of media. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, crafting media products. First thing that I want to start with is this, however. Who has seen this series, Abstract? Yes, great. Well, for those of you who haven't seen it, this is a documentary series that aired on Netflix in February 2017. Basically, it's documentaries that kind of per episode highlight one particular designer. The series kind of shows a vibrant and very colorful presentation of these influential people in the design industry. And this September, the second season of this program aired, which I will briefly show you the trailer of. Let's see.
This is monochromatic light. It looks like there is no colors. But have a look at this. This is what design is about.
Design is everywhere.
Hey guys.
Hi everybody.
It's a basic building block for our imagination.
What we consider truth depends on how you look at it.
There is no obvious route from beginning to end. And there's no guarantee of getting to the end either.
It can be really scary because there's lots of people that need to know what your vision is. The ideas are endless.
You have to question yourself in order to create. I love showing this is possible.
It has to do something better than what came before.
We can play together. We can live together.
There's nobody in the room. There's also no art.
If we are to survive on the planet, we must design where we're going from here.
Well, talking about advertising, huh? Well, where the first season is still pretty focused on tangible forms of design, like, for example, interior design with Ilse Crawford and architecture with Bjarke Ingels. The second season did like the show's title suggests, and that it became a little bit more abstract in terms of content. For example, with Instagram's designer Ian Spelter, that you can see here, and bioarchitect for MIT Media Lab, Neri Oxman. What is interesting about this series is that it should be a documentary series about design, but at times it feels a lot like an advertising tool for the designers that are portrayed there. These are, for example, screenshots of the introductions of every single episode, where you can see that the introduction, also in terms of music and in terms of how the camera moves, in terms of all these different graphics, they're very much tailored towards the persona that is being portrayed in the series. Something else that became quite apparent, and mostly in this episode, that's the one with Neri Oxman, is how these objects or these tools or systems that these designers create in the episodes become more of a tool to support the designer's media representation rather than a thing to dissect itself. In an article about abstract writer Steve Green says, Oxman's episode, which outside of a few nods towards some creations from the MIT Media Lab, is largely an exercise in aspirational psychotechnical speak. That comes to a head with a discussion at Walden Pond, which sends the episode on a philosophical tangent, underlining how abstract often asks its audience to connect with the designers portrayed on a lofty poetry of what they're saying, rather than what they've created. Well, the moment that he mentions is this one, where she's going on and on about the design is practice of letting go, and very philosophical understanding of what design is. I have to give abstract some credit, because in the episode, for example, with Ruth Carter, who's the Black Panther costume designer, gives the subject a bit more of an honest chance to reject their own hero status. Hearing Carter talk about the challenges and the restless nights that she had while creating for Black Panther gives a bit more insight than the, at times, kind of repeated display of how someone's creation fits into their marketing product or a persona in the episodes. However, this idea of using the things that designers make as a tool to support their media image does not only happen on a commercial level, like, for example, Netflix, but also on a much smaller scale. Like, for example, Design Academy Eindhoven, who's right around the corner there. I think you've probably seen the exhibition. For my thesis project last year, I interviewed designers from about 3 generations of this school, where I also graduated myself. Some of them are also in this slide. As my thesis project reflected on how social media has affected the way that design is displayed, I interviewed all the designers about their use of social media, and mostly Instagram. The conversations had a particular focus on the value between objects and the images that they produce. Because I graduated from the same school, it allowed me to see the creation process, let's say, from very up close, considering that in Design Academy, whether you do a making masters or not, you're all put together in the same space. Somebody a while back told me, or referred to this space as coming close, the feeling of being in the space coming close to the idea of walking into a backstage area of a television show. This comment in context of the conversation didn't say so much, but for me it's quite pointing, considering that it suggests that everything that happens in this space is a preparation to launch outwards into media. When interviewing the alumni, I found out that most of them, in the way that they describe their projects, say that the object becomes less important or almost less important than the photograph of the project. This once again supports the idea that the designer's creation has become a tool or prop to support their online media appearance. In this case, the designer's Instagram account. Some of those designers found international support with galleries and recognition with other institutions merely by posting a photo. This shift in value is interesting to me, because where design objects and craft have historically been part of or interfering with industrial processes, we now find ourselves in an era where design projects are predominantly used as props to support a designer's media appearance, more than that they actually interfere with these systems. In a 2012 article called Craft Fetishism, curator-in-chief of the Design Museum, Justin McKirk, reflects upon this idea, and especially the image of craftsmanship, and how that has become a peg on which we've hung fashion, nostalgia, and morality. The question of fetishism arises, he says, from the way that those 3 aspects are sewn together in advertising and in media. He says, on the one hand, craftsmanship appeals to us in a period of ethical consumption, small carbon footprints, and let's not forget austerity. Evoking craft through advertising is a way of mitigating the associations with polluting factories, sweatshop labor, and unnatural materials. He continues, on the other hand, craftsmanship tugs at those aspirational consumer instincts that only a few years ago were embodied by the word limited edition and luxury. When I say that we are fetishizing the handmade, it is this aspect in particular that I'm referring to. So in his article, he mostly points at these images of mostly bearded men that we all know in leather aprons that are used by luxury brands in order to sell their products in media. Considering that this article was written in 2012, I would say that craft has been influenced by media now much more than McCurk at the time was describing. With craft, I mean making in the way sociologist Richard Sennett describes in The Craftsman. So that is craft as a thinking and understanding that happens through making and the repeating of that making. As seen from my interviews with the Design Academy alumni, this craft, however, goes further than the making of a material, object, or project. The language that these alumni use kind of describes the creation of the Instagram images of their the language that the alumni use to describe the way that they take the images on their Instagram suggests that this action has become a craft in itself. The repeating action that Sennett suggests as being part of a craftsman's process or the becoming of a craftsman we see back in the repeated attempt to make the perfect social media image that fits the account that supports the media image of the designer. Some designers go as far as to state that they already take this image into account while creating the project that they're making. One of this year's Design Academy graduates, Boris Brugger, of this project, reflects on this by saying, the modern interior exists as an image to be liked and shared on social media. Well, as an example of Neri Oxman, who does not this straightforwardly design interiors, but actually new materials, this does not only happen on the scale of modern interiors. Probably you're looking at your neighbor now thinking, am I still at a new material event? Like, yes, you are, no worries, please stay where you are. I have still one final question that perhaps you could think about while listening to the other presentations. Design has historically either interfered with or worked with industrial production processes. If, and only if this is still the aim, how are we then going to move away from this design project or the design object as merely being a prop that supports an independent designer's media image, when this seems to be one of the recurring repetitive gestures made by the industry or independent designers? Thank you.